Right, thanks very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Ben Harman, and I'm here to talk about my brand of beef, which is called Chagyu. And so I titled this talk, How to Chagyu Right Every Time, because we're trying to get the same quality carcass every single time. Repeatable quality meat, that's the name of the game for me. Now, I don't know how many of you in here are aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is slightly off topic, but if you know anything about it, I'm hoping I'm somewhere towards the right-hand side, but I really don't know. If you don't know anything about it, please go home and look it up, because it really does help explain a lot of what you read on Facebook and a lot of what the politicians say. Right, so I'm going to start off just talking about, give you a little background on me. So I'm a fourth-generation farmer. My great-grandfather was a silversmith in London. He moved out to the countryside, bought himself a farm, promptly dropped down dead. The farm that we have, 274 hectares, about 550 feet, about 24 inches of rain on top of the Chilterns. It's marginal ground. There's a lot of flint. It's not the greatest ground to farm. But because of the foresight of my grandfather, I am lucky enough to be the owner of the oldest herd of British Charolais in the country. I'm currently the chairman of the British Charolais Society. I sit on the board of Charolais and Charolais International and have held various roles there as well. Yes, I produce Chagyu beef. I also sell a fair bit of semen. In fact, I think possibly the Charolais bull that was talked about in the first session this afternoon was probably one of mine by the looks of it. And I do other stuff as well. I'll travel. I do love to travel. I'll go anywhere at any time for any reason. It's a big old world, and travel is absolutely fatal for prejudice. The more you get out, the more you learn every time. And other stuff. I used to sell a lot of pinball machines. This picture here is Todd McCulloch, who is an NBA player who came to the Pinball World Championships, which I held on my farm once. It never left Vegas before. It's never left Vegas again, but we had a great day that day. So whereabouts am I then? This is kind of important for how I sell my beef. We have 3 farms. And what we have up on the top left there is, just trying to get the video to work here, is where I live at home, which is Grove Farm. Zooming in on the map there. So we own this bit of land. We've been there for about 100 odd years across the family, but we also have 2 other farms which we rent. This picture of the heifers that you're looking at the bottom there, it looks quite rural, but that was actually taken just about here. So you see that we really are urban fringe farmers, which brings disadvantages and advantages. On the negative side, we have a lot of fences cut, we have a lot of dogs walking, we have a lot of fires set and things like that. But on the positive side, and this really is the positive, we live within 25 minutes of 5 of the country's richest postcodes. And in that bottom right-hand corner of this map are 19 million of the country's richest consumers. So what I'm aiming at is adding value to my product. I'm looking at a high-price product. And I do charge a lot for my meat, and I do charge a lot, A, because it's repeatable, B, because it's good, and C, because I'm selling it to rich people. And that really, really helps. So when I started thinking about how to do this presentation, it occurred to me that there are a few things that really set me on the road to doing what I do. And they came down to 3-word acronyms. And the first one is BBW. Now, I don't know how many of you on this side of the room at the back there have ever known what a BBW is, but I can tell you, for me, it's about my belly, my business, and welfare. And that welfare is my welfare as well as my cattle's welfare. And as we go through the talk, we'll see that the 2 are intrinsically linked. If I'm going to have a party, and I do love a party, if I'm going to entertain, and I love to entertain, and I love to cook, I'm going to sell my meat, I'm going to serve my meat, I've got to be absolutely certain that it's blooming good every single time. Because if it's not, I'm looking like a muppet. I can't build a business out of that. It's no good at all. The next thing that was really important to me setting up my business was, as mentioned, where I live. Location, location, location. I'm in the southeast of England. I've got a great opportunity with a massive market on my doorstep. If I was going to set up a business to sell meat, take advantage of that. And the third thing, Meat and Livestock Australia had a huge influence on me. I went to Rockhampton Beef Week in 2009, where I took a couple of these photos. And I was lucky enough to attend a conference similar to this. MLA did a talk on repeatable quality meat, and that was the foundation of everything I do. I've learned other things along the way, some wonderful stuff from AHDB and from doing the live to dead demonstrations and from my own experience, but MLA really were pivotal in me finding out how to make the beef right every time. So I'm going to whip through this quick because I'm aware that my talk may well run long. But with apologies to the Welsh and Irish and Scots here, Sir Clive Woodward did do something pretty good. And one of his mottos was this, and I like it: do 100 things 1% better. And this is about marginal gains. So some of the steps I take to try and get my beef to be the same every time might seem really, really small. But when you add up all those small differences, in the end you get a big difference. And the proof is in the eating, really. My beef is repeatable. It is the same every time. The customers come back every time. They want more every time. And why? Because it's always the same, because I'm having the same process and I'm trying to do everything as well as I can. The rinse and repeat, once you find out what works, don't get tired, don't get bored, don't get lazy, keep on doing the things that work. Pound the rock is another way of saying the same thing. Get it right every time. When you find out what works, you just got to keep working at it and keep doing the same thing. So what is a Chagyu? I rather loftily say it's a concept, not a crossbreed. So yeah, it starts with a crossbreed. Obviously, Wagyu, Charolais, you'd call it a Chagyu. What else would you call it? So I started doing the Chagyus partly because I wanted some good meat for myself, and also to help give an easy entry for my heifers into the herd. I don't have to touch many calves at all. I think the bull earlier that was shown is one of my bulls. I focused very highly on easy calving. I focused it on a number of years, so I don't have calving issues. But the Wagyu calves are tiny. It's a terribly easy entry for the heifers. So I buy Wagyu semen, and I buy it out of the catalogue because I don't care what they look like, and it's just as well because they look ugly as sin. So I buy solely on eye muscle area and marble score. The rest of the characteristics are going to be taken care of by the Charolais, by the strength of the Charolais breed. But I want to add value to that, and I'm looking for the eye muscle area and marble score because I'm selling high price cuts and I'm selling a quality bit of beef. So I buy the semen out of the catalogue, and I have a synchronized breeding programs. Now I do my own AI, and I'm very successful with it, but I don't attribute that success to myself, because actually throwing semen in a cow really isn't very difficult. You can get that right very quickly. The strength of my breeding program is really down to the brilliance of my vets. We tailored the program over a couple of years to get it closer to what was required from my cattle in my circumstance, and what we found is, and it seems utterly remarkable, and it is utterly remarkable, but we get up to 95% success rate with AI on synchronized breeding programs. That takes a fair bit of doing, but again, it's not me, it's my vet, and credit where credit's due. I tend to carve the heifers at about 2.5. Every now and then one of them will creep up to closer to 3. That's if I don't do a lot of showing. I'm not a huge fan of showing, but if I have an animal that has show potential, I might let her grow on a little bit before I serve her. But really, I'm aiming at a 2.5 for carving the heifers down. So Charolais Wagyu, the perfect blend for me. I appreciate everyone has different experiences, and every farm is different, every environment is different. We have to find what works with us and run with it. So for me, the Charolais Wagyu is the perfect blend. And why is it? Because we take the strengths of the Charolais breed, with apologies to the other breeders in here and breed societies, Charolais way ahead of the competition. This is a fundamental truth in cattle breeding, that nothing grows quite like a Charolais. Nothing does weight for age like a Charolais. It is the unique strength of the Charolais breed. So I'm taking the strength of the Charolais breed. Now the quality, what I'm talking about here is, as a pedigree breeder and someone who's been in the game quite a long time, I've been breeding my cows specifically for what I'm looking for, which is what my market is looking for quite a long time. So I'm looking at things like spring of rib, and I'm breeding for eye muscle area, as well as the milk, as you saw in the picture of that heifer a couple of slides ago, as well as functionality. So I've got quality in my females already. And temperament, echoing some of what was said before, temperament is so important for me on the farm and for everyone on the farm. Quiet cattle grow better, kill better, manage better. I have a hard and fast rule, and I don't have to apply it very often, but for some of those who keep cattle in here, you may know what I mean by the look. If I ever walk into a yard and I get the look from any animal, I don't care who they are, I don't care if they're my favorite, I don't care if they get the highest EBVs, I don't care who they are. Give me the look once, you're gone. That's the end of it. And because of that, I have as quiet a bunch of cattle as you will ever find anywhere. They're absolutely magnificent, they're easy to work with, and that helps me produce a high quality meat. And obviously I like the scale of the Charolais, although my Charolais may be a bit smaller than some of the guys who are perhaps selling bulls for a huge amount of money, but I'm breeding for what I need, for my market and my customers. I'm in a TB1 area, an edge area. I find it very difficult to sell bulls for breeding in Scotland now. That market is gone from me. I'm finding it increasingly difficult to sell bulls in Carlisle. What I need to do is focus on what my market is, and my market is selling easy calving Charolais bulls to mostly local guys and guys and gals. And conformation, I've bred my Charolais for the conformation I need. What I don't need, and I think it's been mentioned before, and excuse me when I stick out here, I don't need a huge arse. I don't want a huge arse on my cattle. That's mince. My money is made out of high-priced cuts, out of the loin, out of the fillet. I don't need a massive arse because I can't add a huge amount of value to the mince. And that's all going into mince, and mince isn't my market. It causes more problems than it solves for me. And then I take the advantages of the Wagyu. So marbling, clearly, that's the prime thing that the Wagyu brings is marbling. I'll show you a little picture in a minute. So I'm trying to add a bit of quality to what is already a quality carcass. So I take the marbling, the docility of the Wagyu, the perception which I'm selling to my customers. If I can say to my customers, oh yeah, this Wagyu stuff, it sells for £1,000 a kilo, you can have a bit of that, and I'm only charging you 40. It sounds like a nice little pitch for them, so it works for me. And the point of difference, and one of the points of difference that I'm currently working on and that I really, really like, and this comes out of a fabulous trip. I went to Anuga, which is one of the world's biggest food fairs in Cologne, just last year, and there was a guy there preparing Wagyu meat in front of us. Now, I can't sell that. Don't get me wrong. I tasted it. It's nice. I can't eat a lot of it, even though I'm a huge meat eater, because it's so, so rich. It's rich like cat food rich, and I'm not sure that's really my kind of thing. But what I would ask you to note there, if I can point, is the flour. That flour is cut very cleverly by the chef there, taking some of the fat and trimming it down. If you take one of those petals and stick it between your thumb and forefinger, it melts. And the reason it melts is because the Wagyu fat is very high in oleic acid. Oleic acid has a low melting point. Oleic acid is the same stuff as you find in olive oil. We're talking health benefits here. Use what you have and then run with it. So for my campaign next year, I'll be pointing towards the oleic acid content of my meat. And in fact, I'm sending some away to have it sampled quite shortly. So again, setting up this business, I need to consider what's important. And what's important to me? Well, welfare. There is nothing more important to me in my business. In fact, aside from my fabulous family, welfare of my cattle and the welfare of myself are intrinsically linked. If my cattle aren't happy, I'm not happy. So having a high status of welfare, having cattle that are easy to handle, having cattle that love me and that I love back, that's really important. And that helps me with the next two things. So quality and repeatability, intrinsically linked. It's no good me having a good meat this time, selling a bloke a lump of meat next time, and it's rubbish. And I need it to not only be good now, I need it to be good every single time. So quality and repeatability, what does that give us? Profitability. Now, I'm not anthropomorphic, and well, at least I try not to be, but when I consider what's important to my cattle, actually, their welfare is the most important thing to them as well. Now, I couldn't produce cattle in a feedlot, and it's not because I don't think they're looked after well. I think they're looked after magnificently. I've been to some amazing feedlots in the States and Canada and Australia. They have animal hospitals on site. They have vets running around. The cattle have all of their needs. They have all of their freedoms met. They get fed. They don't get chased about too much, but I don't think they get to exhibit their natural behavior. And if I had to be a feedlot producer in order to stay in the business, well, I wouldn't stay in the business, because what I love about what I do is my interaction with the cattle. And that wouldn't do for me. But then when I started asking my customers what's important to them, I found out that actually we're all fighting the same battles here. We're all after the same stuff. So quality and repeatability, again, that's what they want primarily. They're buying a quite expensive bit of beef, and they're having their mates round for a Saturday night dinner party, barbecue, whatever it is, and they'll tell the story, oh yeah, I know this local farmer, he does this, that, and the other, and it's all good. But if the product isn't good, then I've blown it. And part of the job for me is, when you eat, yeah, you eat with your mouth and your nose and your eyes, and we use all these things to assess the food, but actually you eat with your brain as well. And if you can have a high expectation and you can deliver on that expectation, that's how you keep selling beef, and that's how you grow your business, by hitting and exceeding the expectations every time. Set a high bar and bloom and reach it. Increasingly, my customers are asking for grass-fed beef. And this is handy for me because my Wagyus, apart from the ones that are born in the autumn, which spend the first couple of months inside over that first winter, my Wagyus are out, or Chagyus are out-wintered. So I do have a grass-fed story to tell. And I also have plenty of stories about me, about my grandfather, about the Charolais, about how long we've been in this, about how I got the semen in the first place, which is a little bit dodgy. Ask me in the bar later. So you've got to have a story because it's not just in the beef that they're buying, it's the story they're buying as well. Good, still green. So, how do I do this? Rule number 1, no stress. No stress for me, no stress for my animals. The trust is a two-way street. And if my animals trust me and I trust my animals, then I'm halfway there. But these are the areas where we introduce stress into the cattle because we're asking them to do things here which we have to ask them to do in the nature of our business. But these are things which introduce stress into cattle because they don't do these things naturally. So when we handle the cattle, we can stress them. When we mix groups of cattle, we can stress them. When we feed them, we can stress them if we don't do it right. Weaning is enormously stressful for animals, as is transport. So let's move on to rule number 2. Just follow rule number 1 every single time because it's really, really important. So let's talk about how we do that. And I'm so glad to hear other people earlier on today talking about this too because I think we're all pushing in the same direction here. You're handling. You're going to have to handle animals. If you're doing your job right, you're going to have to weigh them. Maybe you have to do TB test them. There are going to be things you have to do. So have a really good handling system. Have a handling system where your animals are happy to go through it. When they go through it, it's quiet. If they're shouting, if they're bellowing, if I'm shouting and bellowing, then it's not working. Something's wrong. If they're going through it and they're quiet, then they're not stressed. And low stress, more meat, higher quality, more profitability. The whole message all the way through this is low stress works for us. So the pull don't push thing, if you run into a field with your quad bike and chase the cattle out to get them into the yard so you can run them through the handling system, you're acting like a predator. You are chasing the cattle. They are not liking this. You're introducing stress, and that's going to make the handling experience more stressful. So pull, don't push. If I want my cattle to come in from the field, I stand at the gate and I shake a bucket, and they come. And they come because they're going to get a reward when they come in the yard. They're going to get some of those nuts. They love it. So they come piling in, they get their nuts, and then I do my handling, and everybody's happy. So mixing groups of cattle, this is particularly important towards the end, and we'll come to this in a bit. But when you mix groups of cattle, you get this hierarchical reordering, which we see as bullying, as fighting. This will disrupt their growth curve. Disruption of the growth curve will decrease the amount of meat that you have to sell and will decrease the quality of the meat you have to sell, and I will justify those statements in a moment. So be careful and minimize the amount of times you have to mix the cattle up. Changes in feed regimes are what introduces, or one of the prime causes of introducing gristle into your meat. So if you consider a worst case scenario here, where you might have a suckler producer who does a wonderful job, sells his calf at weaning, enormously stressful time anyway, it goes into a store situation where it has a massive change of diet, stored for a period, and then it gets changed again as it goes to a finisher. Now we're having disruption in the diet, massive disruption in the diet and stress at those points, and that is where you're going to find some gristle coming into your meat, and that is going to affect the profitability of your business, and that is going to affect your growth curve, and it is going to affect the volume of meat you have. There's a huge disconnect in our industry. Excuse me, I'm going to have to do this. There is a huge disconnect in our industry between most producers and consumers. And because of that disconnect, producers don't get rewarded for great product because it's sold just like the rest of it. Equally, producers don't get penalized for poor product, provided it's hitting the grade, and the grade isn't necessarily even what's required, but provided it's hitting the grade, you're getting the same reward. So you can minimize stress at weaning quite simply, and there's some good research on that, and some of this is in the paper that accompanies this, where there's a little bit more detail and a few references. But weaning is enormously stressful. You can lose up to 30 kilos of growth off your calves at weaning, and you can minimize it easily. Fence line weaning, it's not complicated. Fence line weaning and managing the diet through the weaning period and introducing a little bit of extra roughage into the diet for the calves before they're weaned will minimize that growth curve disruption, and you will end up with calmer cattle and with happier cattle for it. and transport. So this is hugely important. Imagine that this is not natural for the cattle. So the very first trip they take is the very worst trip they take as far as stress is concerned. And a worst case scenario here would be farmer does a wonderful job, rears his animal, everything's quiet, everything's lovely, it's calm as you like, has never had to leave the farm. Comes to that final day, it gets shoveled onto a trailer, which is a nasty dark corner that cattle don't like going in the first place, and maybe it has to get shouted up to go up there because it's not liking it, and maybe it gets whacked with a stick or something like that, and then it goes into this thing and it's going up the motorway and there's cars flying past, and this is stressful. And when it gets to the slaughterhouse, it's already stressed, and stress at slaughter is a huge cause of loss of meat quality. So just to cap up on those, why is stress so important? Because all of these things we have to do in the ongoing nature of our business cause stress to the animals, or can cause stress to the animals, can cause dietary disruption, will affect your growth curve. All of that has effect on the welfare of the animals and on the quality of the meat that you're going to sell, and ultimately your profitability. So stress at the end. Meat and Livestock Australia. Actually, I'm just going to say, before we go on to that, one of the things I should have said, Temple Grandin, one of my heroes, she had a wonderful line, which is, we owe these animals the best life possible and the best death possible. And if we can follow those and really care about every aspect of its life and its death, then we will get the best result out. So stress at the end. Meat and Livestock Australia pointed out to me that stress, 80% of meat quality comes in the last 42 days before slaughter and the first 28 days after. They also pointed out to me that the speed and distance covered as an animal leaves a crush in a period of time has an inverse correlation to the quality of the meat. So all the things I've talked about here, having calm animals, so a flighty animal, a different breed, a different breeder, a flighty animal leaves a crush quickly, you're not going to get the same quality of meat. A calm animal is going to be calm all the way through its life, hopefully. It's going to be calm at slaughter. That's where you're going to get your meat quality from. The last 42 days before slaughter, if you mix groups of animal, that's how long it takes for the stress hormones to return down to base level. It's 42 days. Now, it's a curve, so a lot of that loss of the stress hormones will happen relatively quickly. But if we're talking about marginal gains here, you don't need to mix those cattle within 42 days of slaughter, because you know when they're going to go, more or less, because you know how they're growing. So don't mix them. Don't change the diet. Don't mix them. Make sure that they know how to travel. All my Chagyus have always traveled several times before death. And if for one reason or another they've never left the home farm, well, then I teach them to travel. And I teach them to travel way before this 42 days becomes. Because when I get to the slaughterhouse, I need my animals to be quiet. And this stress memory, go back to the handling thing. If every time your animal gets handled, it's getting stressed because you're having to shout it, you're having to wave a stick at it, it doesn't want to do this, you're stressed, it's stressed. Next time it comes into the handling system, it's stressed again. This is what we call stress memory. So it knows that this system is stressful. It knows being handled is stressful. It's stressed already. Now, bear in mind, the last time that it gets handled is that it goes up the chute of the slaughterhouse. And if you have taught it to be stressed at handling, when you get to the slaughterhouse, it's going to be stressed, and you are damaging your meat quality. And you may not end up with dark cutting meat, but bear in mind this is a scale, and it's a scale of quality. And if you can do everything you can to maintain the quality at every step of the journey, then I think you're doing your job. I'm going to rush through hanging and butchering and marketing because I'm orange, and I've got a couple more things I really want to say at the end. So I hang for 28 days. Why do I hang for 28 days when the data says after 12 days it doesn't really make any difference? Perception of quality. It's what my customers want. I can stamp it on the label. People like that. It probably doesn't make a great deal of difference, but if it helps me charge more for my meat and sell more meat, so much the better. So I hang for 28 days in a standard way, about 2 degrees C. I have a master butcher. He's absolutely brilliant. He's as enthusiastic about my cattle as I am. He does the packaging right. He does the cutting right. We try and cut every animal differently. We've never done two the same. I will come out with cuts that maybe people aren't used to. Maybe you are, but I'll do a picanha. I'll do a tri-tip. I'll do a Denver steak. Every time we do it, it'll be different. And once you've got your product, you need to build a brand around it. Every time I sell to a pub or a restaurant, they get flags. And the deal is that every time they sell a burger or a steak, a flag goes in the top, because it's no good someone knowing that what they're eating is great if they don't know where it comes from. So just push your brand, be proud of it. Sponsor the local rugby team, that was pretty awesome. So this is a campaign I built with Oakman Inns, who are one of the pub chains that I work with. About a month before the product's going to come into Oakman Inns, I'll have them round, we'll start building a campaign, we'll start generating excitement for the product, so when it reaches the pub or the restaurant, then there's already pre-orders. They can justify charging a little bit more for it. Hopefully someone comes in on Tuesday when the carcass went in the previous Friday and goes away disappointed, not because they've had a bad bit of meat, but because it's all gone. And that way, next time it comes in, we get more pre-bookings, we can keep their customers happy as well. Different campaign, horses for courses. I also sell meat privately. Shout about what you do, be proud about what you do. The Facebook thing, very quickly, I spent £24 on Facebook advertising last year. That got me 2,800 new viewings on my videos. By the way, people love a video far more than they love a picture, so if you use videos, definitely use videos. Of those 2,800 new people I had looking at me, I got 8 inquiries, I got 4 new sales. It cost me £6 per sale, and those will probably be repeat orders because they're always repeat orders, so it's worth spending the money on Facebook. Rushing. Be proud of what you do, talk about it, be enthusiastic, tell them about how much you love your cattle, because these are the things that help you sell meat. So I'm going to leave this up here, and I'm going to ask you to multitask because my light's gone red. So multitask on that, well, I just come up with a few little finishing statements. And I want to thank David Mackenzie and Harborough for this research. They spent a lot of time and money putting this together, and I think there's some lovely little facts in here. So to start with, sows. The top 5% of sows in the UK will produce 2.8 tonnes of meat per sow per year. 2.8 tonnes per sow per year. My next little fact is 2.2 tonnes of barley will give you 1 tonne of pig live weight, which will give you 750 kilos of pork. 7 tonnes of barley will give you 1 tonne of bovine live weight, which will give you 540 kilos of beef. What I'm getting at here is we cannot compete on price with pork, let alone chicken. If we can't compete on price, we better be competing on quality. That's our USP as beef producers, it's quality. Now, AHBDB did some wonderful work to show that if you have a bad bit of chicken, you will buy another bit of chicken next week. If you have a bad bit of beef, it will be 3 months before you buy another bit of beef. Get it right every time. Don't let that 3-month gap come in. We've got pressures on our industries from all kinds of directions, spoken about this morning, doesn't need repeating. Get it right every time. And the last 2 little things before I give up the podium. 90 kilos of feed to a 6-month-old bovine will give around 30 kilos of live weight gain. It takes 280 kilos of feed to get 30 kilos of gain at 17 months. The maintenance cost, as again spoken about in other talks today, the maintenance cost of keeping cattle is massive. We need to get them killed earlier, because getting them killed earlier is better for our carbon footprint, it's better for our wallets, and it's how we're going to make some money. And just as a little addendum to that, we need to kill them at spec, not just because they've reached a certain age. Having an artificially assigned age, which is the minimum age for slaughter, isn't going to help us going forward. Chickens have reduced the days to slaughter massively over the last few years, and it's why the chicken meat industry is productive and make some money. And the same thing for pork. They've reduced the days to slaughter massively. If we can't reduce our days to slaughter from below 12 months, then we're stuck. And we're stuck in an artificially stuck period because it's not there for any other reason. So we need to look at that as an industry, is my opinion. And I'm very red, so I'm going to stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you.